Hello, I'm John Shepherd, and in this short video we're going to take a look at long jump and in particular the rotational forces which the jumper is subject to. So that's backwards and forward rotation. When the long jumper leaves the board, their body will be subject to rotational forces. Now, these can be either backward or forward, and I'll say more of this later. But it's also important to realise that the movement that a jumper makes in the air cannot propel them further forwards. All they can do is balance the flight phase and improve the landing. In many respects, it doesn't really matter what technique the jumper uses, whether that's the hang or the hitch kick or the many variations of those. However, there are some very important considerations which must be taken into account, and that's to do with the way that you take off. The optimum takeoff will set out the optimum flight phase, so it's important to really make sure that you hit the takeoff position accurately and get what I call a takeoff drive. We are of course watching Ivana Spanovic. So what do I mean by takeoff drive? Well, you can see that after the takeoff she holds her knee and drives away from the board before completing her hitch kick. Now, as I've become more experienced as a long jump coach, I've begun to realise that there are some hidden ingredients when it comes to the rotational forces the jumper is subject to, and that not all jumpers experience the same type of rotation that you would think that they should do given their particular takeoffs. One example here is Juan Miguel Echeverria and his rather short takeoff, short in that the free leg does not drive fully in front of his body. He starts the first of his 2.5 hitch kicks very early after takeoff without the drive that Spanovic achieved, yet he still manages to get a good landing. So, as well as the technique used and the takeoff drive and takeoff mechanics, what other factors affect rotational forces? Well, the distance being jumped is a big one, in that the longer you go, the more time there is for the body to be subjected to rotation. So that's why the hitch kick 1.5 and 2.5 stride versions can be slightly more beneficial than the hang when jumping longer distances, in that the air is filled with more movement and this combats the rotation. One of the more obvious ways to see whether a jumper has forward or backward rotation is to look at the landing position. A balanced landing with little rotation will enable the jumper's legs to fully extend in front of them and for maximum or optimum distance to be achieved. For forward rotation, very simply put, the jumper will come out of the air earlier than what they really should do, and their feet will drop early into the sand and they'll often rotate forwards out of the pit. Backward rotation often results in a good leg shoot position. However, that means that speed through the takeoff has been lost because of the jumper's mid-air torso position in the main. Sometimes you'll see that it's leaning backwards, and this will create a braking force that will slow down the trajectory and therefore the distance of the jump. Now, backward rotation can be more subtle in that there can be a layback at takeoff, a slight layback that results in the backward rotation. Now this is one of the more grey areas, and it's to do with the takeoff. I've discovered and seen some jumpers such as Spanovic and Echeverria take off with their foot pushed slightly in front of them at the point of takeoff. Now you can see this here with Echeverria, with his foot pushed well in front of his centre of mass at takeoff. Now this would normally impart backward rotation onto the jumper, and you would see that in the landing. However, with Echeverria, he seems to be pretty balanced in flight, and perhaps this just reflects his natural abilities and his strong eccentric capacity, of which I'll say more in a specific video in future. Here's Sarah from my group, and you can see in this early season jump that her leg shoot was compromised. However, later on in the season, when she was jumping longer distances, the leg shoot was much improved. It's worth mentioning, as this could affect other jumpers out there with similar issues, in that because she's got such long limbs and it takes a while for them to rotate around through a hitch kick, that she needs to jump a certain distance to complete the movement and get an effective leg shoot, which is not a sign of rotational forces pulling the legs down in this case. It's also important to realise that not every single jump will be identical, and a slightly different takeoff and a slightly different takeoff drive can all affect the flight and landing. A further factor which can affect the rotational forces the jumper is subject to is the takeoff angle. Generally, the optimum angle for the long jump takeoff is around 22 degrees, as this will maximise both vertical and horizontal velocity, speed across the board in particular. It can look like jumpers are gaining a lot of height, when in reality they're just following that parabolic path of the 22 degrees. The longer you jump, the higher you're going to climb up into the air at the midpoint of the jump. And that's why a balanced and optimised takeoff is crucial to getting long distances as well as combating rotation. No matter your level or age, it's important to really work on a balanced takeoff, and I would recommend takeoff drive in order to maximise your technique and to offset rotational forces. Hopefully this video has cleared up a few misconceptions and misunderstandings regarding forward and backward rotation in the long jump, and that it will help you and your jumping and provide you with some answers and solutions. As usual, thanks for watching and good luck with your training and competition, and do leave any comments you may have in the section below or through my other social media.